19th of August,
Yeah.
15th for, no, not the 15th. No, that's something else.
September.
Wait a minute, let me think. It's a Wednesday, but it's not the 15th. The Riverside.
I can go.
I know November is the 21st. It's a Sunday.
Yeah.
But the one I'm not sure it's October or November.
I'll check.
I'll try to call tomorrow.
Okay.
Good evening. I'd like to call this Wednesday, September 8th, 2021 meeting of the City of Manassas Park Planning Commission to order. The time is 7 p.m. My name is Lester Finkel. I will be reading a statement, and I'll do the roll call at that point. Per the General Assembly's approval of the Governor's amendments to the biennial budget, the Planning Commission may now meet electronically without a quorum actually assembled in a single location and without the in-person Planning Commission members voting on the participation of those who are remoting in. The following benchmarks for the meeting this evening have been met. First, the Governor has declared a state of emergency. I'm reading from the same one here. The state of emergency for the current COVID-19 pandemic in accordance with Code of Virginia. Second, the declared emergency makes it impractical or potentially unsafe for the Planning Commission to assemble in a single location, and guidance from state and federal government support this determination. Therefore, the Planning Commission will be meeting with various members participating electronically through GoToMeeting. Third, the meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the Planning Commission. Fourth, the Planning Commission would make available a recording or transcript of the meeting on its website in accordance with Code of Virginia. Fifth, notice has been and will continue to be provided to the public using available methods. Lastly, we have made and will continue to make arrangements for public access through electronic means, including the ability to comment. Those commissioners attending this evening in person are Commissioner Collier, Commissioner Evans, Commissioner Mensing, and myself. Commissioner Beckett's, are you on the line? Okay, I don't hear anything, so I
think it's just Dean Grover's.
Okay, very good, thank you. So there's no commissioner participating virtually then. Very good. I'd like to do a moment of silence in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll take care of that this time. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next agenda item is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, would anyone care to make a motion to approve the agenda as is?
So moved.
Motion, second?
Second.
Second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next agenda item is adoption of minutes from August 11th, 2021 meeting. Are there any changes to the meeting minutes from August 11th?
I emailed my changes.
Very good. Anyone else?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I may have a motion to adopt the meeting minutes for August 11th, 2021 as amended.
Moved.
Motion, second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next agenda item is time for members of the public. I don't see any members of the public, and we don't know of any that are joining in virtually, so we'll move along. There is no new business for this evening. We do have a continuing work section here for updating and modifying comprehensive plans, goals, and objectives. This evening, we will be looking over the environmental chapter. No formal action, of course. This is a discussion only opportunity. So with that, we appreciate Administrator Barry, if you would start us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Hinkle, and good evening, everybody. So we're going to start with our environmental chapter goals and objectives. This actually is a pretty extensive list of goals in this chapter, and I thought it would be helpful to kind of provide at least some annotations to kind of get you to understand why we made some of these changes. I did want to say that I did meet with Alan Rowley, our Environmental Services Manager, to go over some of these. He is very familiar with our stormwater.
Engineering services.
What did I say?
Environmental.
I'm sorry, engineering services, excuse me. Getting my words mixed up.
Close. It starts with an E, right?
And, well, that might be one of the goals that we might want to add to the chapter.
That's what I want to
There you go.
Engineering,
Okay.
yes, it's not environmental.
A little foreshadowing there, right?
To go over them, he's familiar with the stormwater management program, and I did touch base a little with our Public Works Operations Manager. She does look at our trash and recycling program for us, and do, believe it or not, there's a lot of paperwork to be done because we do have a solid waste management program, and we have recycling information that we need to give to the state on a regular basis. So that is how I prepared for the comments I have and the changes proposed. So I kind of wanted to go through them individually, just to note, when this was written, it always said special use permit, so I tried to get them for the most part, but the term we use now is conditional use. And I really kind of wanted to stress that because a lot of these points talk about rezonings and conditional use permits. And really, those are really the applications that you may want to have some stricter requirements in the zoning ordinance, since it is a legislative approval. Therefore, you can kind of go beyond the minimum of what is required for for just site plan regulatory, but to include issues like we're talking about here. So those would be really the appropriate applications. And we do have sections in the zoning ordinance that specifically talk about these type of land use applications. And so what this is really saying for the first one is when you submit a land use application for the applicant to analyze these specific areas, which include, we took out all Chesapeake Bay references because we as a city are not part of, and I had to get the language right, so if you are in a tidewater community, which all the counties and cities that are, it's supposed to be, what is it, east of 95? And I guess for the most part that's true. We are not included, but we could opt in if we chose to, because I reread the list and I always wondered, Loudon is not a tidewater community, but I'm pretty sure they did adopt their own Chesapeake Bay regulations, given the fact that the Potomac's right on their border. But so, you can opt into the program. It is not mandatory in the city. We don't have any references or any kind of Chesapeake Bay overlay or ordinance requirements. So we really did want to stay away from that specific language, but and they go by RPA. So a resource protection area is literally, it's 100-foot buffer landward, essentially from the top of the stream bank. And it also technically incorporates any kind of associated wetlands that you can find in that area, and you're supposed to delineate that 100-foot buffer on both sides of the stream. There is actually mapping requirements as well, but that's kind of, so we generalized that language to get an idea of that's what it's looking for. You look through these, these are just environmentally sensitive areas. Similar, I think, Fairfax County, they have something called an environmental quality corridor. So it does include the RPA, but it's more expansive. So it does include sensitive areas for wildlife. If there's specific flora or fauna that they have that goes through that. I know they include that as part of their comprehensive plan. Environmental sensitive area where they recommend, that those areas be preserved. And of course, one of the other issues is the 100-year floodplain. And so of course that is left. We didn't really change much of that, but that's essentially what this is proposing to do. And I guess one of the questions really to the commission is, do we really think this is practical given the small area of the city that it is? We don't have a lot of development areas. When you go for any kind of property, if you're setting aside this amount of property, it tends to limit the development. But again, if you're looking at it from an environmental perspective, this is what you would want to do. Start with your 15% slopes and of course the waterways with the 100-year floodplain and any kind of sensitive areas within that corridor. So it was discussed, Alan and I, whether or not this would be practical in the city. So I didn't know what your thoughts were on that, but I felt that as, we should try to make an attempt at least to preserve, I think actually what is conserve the land that we do have along, especially any kind of streams that we have within the city that could have some environmental concerns and worthiness to kind of at least conserve and create some type of corridors throughout the city. So, but these are really just kind of baseline items.
Do we have an idea of what that will do for encumbering any kind of possible development along?
Well, right, so,
stretch?
and then that's kind of where the analysis takes place is when somebody submits an application
Okay, so it
for
would be an
rezoning.
application by
So
application.
in that,
Okay.
that's really where the staff and the applicant would negotiate what they're looking for with guidance from the comprehensive plan to say, we really would like this area preserved. We'd like you to show that on your plan. And how it would impact your development to see how you could better fit it. There's always negotiation between we don't have necessarily density here, so in terms of the number of dwelling units per acre or any kind of floor area ratio, it's really just based on our setbacks. So we do have a lot more flexibility than other jurisdictions because that's usually how they run up to those maximum limits. And there's some negotiation power in that because you're working with the staff and applicant who have at least some kind of different opinions but we have a little more flexibility. I don't necessarily I think it's when you ask an applicant to do it, you're getting the most information you can to see what the boundaries of those limits of development could be. And then if that becomes an issue, you can negotiate that further as part of the process. Because you can look at it from also a site design perspective for the development or just looking at areas where you think should be conserved, especially if you're looking for some type of trail or open space within the community, and that's one of the starting points. So I don't think it's a bad idea, but you can.
Because if we do have it, it would be good to go forward with it and not, because I know the application by application, there's the, like the trading type thing, but I would, if it's in here, would want to see it actually work.
And again, it wouldn't be for any kind of by right development. Like if that was the zoning and it was one of the permitted uses, you could just go in with the minimal regulations. These would only be under the legislative application submissions, like the conditional use and the rezonings. And so we could analyze that for a use perspective.
Any other thoughts on?
These are common environmental issues that people look for. There were several of these strategies that seemed a bit above our, I don't want to say capability, but practicality. That's why Alan and I decided to strike this one. We're really not going to do this on a regular basis. It is a bit impractical, but I think if there was an application that we had of some kind of concern that had some kind of environmental protection measures, that's certainly something that we would look into. We do have some industries that may warrant that concern, and when that, like concrete business. So I did, make some calls to the Department of Environmental Quality to make sure that they had all their proper permits, that they were operating correctly. So that's where I really see this, that should be on an as-needed basis and didn't necessarily need to be spelled out in the plan. So, there's always, for land use development, there's always ideas and techniques for stormwater management. As everybody, you'll see this low impact development techniques. Is everybody a bit familiar with what those are? I'm happy to kind of explain it in the most simplistic terms I can. Really, you're doing little small stormwater quality and quantity areas, almost, they almost call them like little wetland areas on individual lots in really small areas, so you can capture the really small storms quickly and have that filtered. So essentially it's kind of like little rain gardens in everybody's yard is what it is. And it's supposed to, because it's the first rainfall, it captures a lot of the runoff and the pollutants and gets it to go through. There's an under drain and it has the soils that allow proper percolation and trying to get the pollutants out. So that's a technique. I guess it was developed in Maryland from what I remember many years ago. And they do have a lot. You'll see those in parking lots where they have the curbs, and then they have a little inlet there. That's an LID, and they call it low impact development, the acronym for that, designs, and that's what it's supposed to do. And you'll see certain plants or sometimes stones and all these different, and you can see trees and all. So that's what that approach is. And certainly it is environmentally a good way to assist in water quality. I think one of the downsides is that the quantity issue in terms of managing the amount of water can be, you really have to supplement it when you're using LID. You have to make sure that you're also capturing and dealing with the quantity of water. But that is, and I thought that was a good thing to keep into the land use development component of this strategies. Okay, so the next one was open space. So as you can see, the original goal set out a minimum of 30%. I didn't know where they got that standard. And I really thought that there probably should have been an analysis or some kind of background as how they estimated it. So I really kind of toned down the language to identify, instead of just a percentage, which what happens is, you're really an accounting exercise. So are you really, you get to count this little patch of grass or that little landscape strip between the curb and the sidewalk, which is really not usable. I mean, it's visually appealing, but it's not usable. So I really try to take the approach of, what do we think the desired open space, what kind of open space do we want? And then, add that to the plan in general terms and maybe some general areas and see if we can attack it that way. Now, I didn't, of course, get into specifics about that because I think that certainly warrants future discussion. I know there's been some talk about adding a dog park and some other open space, perhaps in the downtown area. So those were kind of, and where I thought that that's where this could really focus in on and maybe flesh out that in the actual text of this chapter and identify maybe potential areas. It really gets tricky when you're identifying real specific properties because the property owners realize that and they say, have concerns because if you have to set aside, a significant chunk of your property and can't develop it, that there is, there's that negotiation there. So I really like to be more general, but know that that's probably, the desires of what kind of, and I really like to look at open space as active and passive because I think there truly are two different types, and I think they're equally of value. Or that's really a debate for the citizenry of how they really want to see their municipality divided into those type of open spaces. But I thought just putting this kind of broad-based language in there highlights that open space is a desire and need for the city, and we really want to make sure that we can address all those different needs of various, whether it's sporting leagues, activities, or nature trails, open space. I know we're getting, and I keep hearing a lot of compliments about Blooms Park and the open space and the lack of open space, well, even in Northern Virginia, and what, if I may, gem it is. And, and then there's some give and take because I've also heard about having some activities in there, having some, I believe we discussed the disc golf, right? And that's the give and take. And actually, when we go down further, we'll talk about the, park management plans, because that's another way to address uses and how you're going to manage the overall park and divide it into certain activity zones.
It's good that the quantifying of what exists, that's an excellent place to start.
Exactly.
And what kind of open space we have, like you're saying, and then we can start opening up the conversation about what we should do with what we have. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and then of course the last strategy here is continuing with that theme, and I did highlight for residential and mixed-use developments. Especially if it is going to be in a rezoning, we really should add that aspect of that open areas that people like to congregate and use. Does develop a bit of community when you're there in an open space, or you can see some type of small urban park or something where people can gather. So I try to put that language in here to strengthen or modify this last strategy. Okay, any questions or comments on that? So then we go to the objective 2 about environmental awareness for residents. So what I really did here is several of the last strategies were kind of individual ones. And I thought it was probably best to kind of consolidate those and identify all the different various environmental concerns and just list them in one strategy and really focus on a educational campaign for not only our citizen residents who are people who live here, but also the business community. And all these that are listed are taken really from the action strategies from, let's see, well, previous 4 through 8. 4 through 7, sorry. And that and if it is on an annual basis, you can get that a continual reminder about these informational aspects of environmental sensitive and also proper ways to handle pesticides and fertilizers and household waste. One thing that I didn't add in here that certainly is something that we could also add in the text of the chapter is that we are getting our own waste transfer facility up on Industry Drive. I can't recall who was on the Planning Commission at the time of the conditional use permit. Okay. And John, you were there too. Lester, I don't think you were there at that point. At 9115 Industry Drive, our conditional use permit for a waste transfer facility and recycling center. So it's under construction right now, the waste transfer facility, but they will be holding, and Patriot is our waste management provider, and they will be holding household hazardous waste drop-off days. That may be on a monthly basis. I forget how that's going to work, but that's certainly something to highlight. And I know it is a cost savings to the city because we used to have to contract that service out. So any kind of educational campaign for that is certainly helpful. And we, as part of our stormwater management, our MS4 permit, we have to do educational information campaigns. There still is some information at the front desk here, and I think if there are any kind of city activities that we have a booth for stormwater management, it is actually required as part of our MS4 permit. So I think if it's a more coordinated effort, you can really get the word out if somebody really establishes some type of regular education program. I think that's probably a better way to do it and communicate these issues. Okay, so moving on to the next action strategy. This was again more of being more broad-based, but identifying that we should look for grant opportunities to do this type of work and providing, we'll just call it environmental education programs. Looking on the DEQ website, they actually do have some grants for litter and recycling programs that I honestly wasn't aware of, but that's something that we should probably look into. And I think if there was a concerted effort, with this educational campaign and having a program, it would be beneficial and probably looked on favorably from a grant standpoint when you're applying for such monies. So that was just the change to the action strategy E1.2.2. And then moving on about the recycling program, some of this we actually had to modify because it's already required, and that goal of 25%, it is already required, it's mandated, and actually I think that happened quite a while ago. And we do have to still report our figures. So this was really kind of strategizing at the point where I guess it wasn't mandated, so there really wasn't any point in keeping that, but just reiterating the importance of educating people about proper recycling protocols. I know a lot of times just in speaking with Laura that even just how you put your recycling out really matters, because she told me that she goes through the city and people have them in plastic bags, just they cannot recycle that. That actually becomes trash because they're not going to pick through and open the bags for the recycling. So there are probably some better strategies out there to educate the public on being mindful of what the proper protocols are. I know if stuff gets mixed in and not rinsed out and contaminated, they do have to throw that stuff away. And of course, glass is becoming very hard to recycle now. And even in Fairfax, you can't put it in your weekly bin. You have to take it to the purple dumpster. I forget, I think they have a special name for them. And I know that was brought up with the governing body. I think we decided not to do that at this point in time, to hold off on getting our own purple dumpster.
That was last year, but this year it was approved in FY22.
Oh, okay, well, I stand corrected, so that's good. Okay, so that was from last year, so this year we are, that's wonderful to hear. Do we know when we're gonna get that? Yeah. Okay, so I guess it is, so that's great, so that we can certainly add, and that really fits under this umbrella. I'm glad to hear. Thank you for updating me on that information.
Michelle, since you mentioned the one in Fairfax, it's right across the street from the post office. I take my stuff there all the time.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And you have to take one jar at a time. It's only like one little
hole.
thing, and you can't go and you have
Okay.
one at a time. And
Now, do they separate it by color?
no,
Okay.
everything goes in one place.
I remember when they started originally recycling.
One was
you had
clear
it
and-
separated by color.
Yeah,
And-
yeah.
Okay. That's good. And I know a lot of communities participate in that program, because I know Fairfax does, and I know Loudon does as well. So that's good. That's good that we're continuing to follow suit. And again, these were the education campaigns that I consolidated. And then I kind of already touched on this point, but the litter control program, I don't think we have an active one. It said enhance the one that we have. I'm not aware that we do have one. I don't think we have one. And then I added, I think it would be important to have that in community engagement component, where you do have that adopt a street and people do come out on a regular basis to clean that segment. Also for a community participation, I know that's certainly something that students have to do as part of their curriculum for public service hour. So, I really wanted to kind of add that community engagement component for that strategy as well. Any questions or comments on that objective?
Just on that last section there on the adopt a street, how would you enforce that? Enforce isn't a good word, but how would that be handled?
Managed. Well, that certainly has not. This is a strategy. That would certainly have to be a task that would be taken up by city staff to see how that program would be managed. I think it's a universal program, so somebody would really have to look in how to start it and
Like
and
one day
ensure
a week, or
right.
everybody
And I
at
think
one
they
time.
have materials and how to
And then an
do it.
application process, right? I mean, there would have to be some type of an application
Because I know we see, Saturday morning, a lot of times people are out, especially there on Signal View Drive going across, and then they pick up everything and then bag it up, and then somebody comes along and picks it up after them.
Yeah, and that's actually
that's-
part of the, that's probably Loudoun County and whoever is doing that.
Prince William County.
I really like,
I think it's a VDOT program.
is it a VDOT program?
Yeah, it could be, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a very effective thing. I
Right,
mean,
yes.
I hate to ride down the street and see trash along and,
Right,
or in the street, but anyway.
right, and actually, we could extend this to Stream Valleys and Blooms Park.
Neighborhood, yeah, yeah.
Right, because I know.
I thought I saw adopt, wasn't there an adopt a street?
I think, yeah, there is.
Okay.
There is somewhere as well, yeah. Okay. Yeah, we would have to look into the management of that kind of program. And since we're not under VDOT, well, although I guess we could ask them if somehow we could at least get some materials or understanding how they operate that. Okay, so moving on to air quality. So I just wanted to give you some background. Air quality is usually handled on a regional level. And so, the Council of Governments is really where most of the air quality policies and I think even the Regional Commission get involved with. So a lot of these items I kind of, put on that level instead of making it very localized for the city where we would really have limited resources or effectiveness to carry these out. So especially Action Strategy E1.3.1, I don't think we're ever going to establish a air quality monitoring procedures or program within the city. I think it's probably best handled by VDOT, especially at our major traffic intersections. But if you want to keep that in there, that's fine. But even Alan, from a practicality standpoint, it just seemed that it's not really worth keeping.
Yeah, I can just make a comment. When we were going over our governing body priorities, I think it was environmental sustainability was close. It almost got there to kind of the top priorities, and who's to say that's not going to change in a few years? Environmental sustainability may keep kind of rising up as we resolve. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we're still trying to kind of survive and put out fires, but eventually but even without that being a top priority, we do hear kind of desires, at least initiatives, for environmental programs such as solar or electric fuel charging stations, other environmental initiatives. So perhaps that a better or a good objective is when this becomes a higher funding priority for the city, that we do actually get an environmental sustainability officer. That's what many jurisdictions across the country are doing, and they take the lead on all these kinds of initiatives that we're talking about to promote environmentalism, not just from a stormwater standpoint, which is what we do here, but from all aspects, including carbon emissions and other things. And
Particulate matter, I mean, we were not on an island from that standpoint. I mean,
exactly.
We're affected by all that's around us unless we had industry that was here that was pumping out stuff that we could filter or stuff ourselves. We're connected with everybody else, so it makes sense from the regional standpoint.
It's an important thing. So we just finally got like a transportation program manager this year. So now we have someone actually evaluate transportation programs. But that's up there. It's one of the priorities from an infrastructure standpoint. So in the future, I could very well see environmental sustainability becoming a higher priority. So when that does, I would recommend that we place something like that. We consider getting a sustainability officer who can actually start tackling some of these programs that we're outlining here today. It's just a suggestion.
It's just like Lester says, though, we're so close here. You go 10 feet one way or the other, you're in city of Manassas and you're in Prince William County. So if we're doing something here in our little city to help the environment, well, when the wind blows which direction, what's happening over there comes right over to us. So
it's I mean, that's the dilemma when you get to when you're discussing, but like if everyone takes that position, then nothing ever gets done, right? So it's like everyone
coordination would
all along, everybody has to be in sync with what's going on.
Correct.
And work together.
Correct. So you can be in a lose-lose situation, right? You can do everything you want to do, and then everyone else still doesn't.
Goes along and does
that's
what
you're
they
seeing
want
on a
to
global
do.
scale right now. Or you can say, look, at least we're going to do our part regardless of what everyone else is doing, and we're also going to keep trying to convince others to kind of follow.
Join in.
Yeah, but if we never do it, then no one else is gonna is going to follow,
Oh,
unfortunately.
look what Manassas Park is doing. Maybe we should do that too. Yeah.
Or if we don't know what our
So it's
neighboring
just because
areas are doing.
you
then,
look at these
yeah.
chapters, right? And
Yeah.
so I laud Mickey because she's really trying to consolidate it to what we actually manage, which is
Correct.
stormwater and water quality.
Yes,
That's really
that we can do.
what we're currently in the business of doing. But there's
Yep.
multiple other components of environmental programs, which is why the state has a Department of Environmental Quality and the federal government has one. But you don't see that translating a lot to local governments besides those new positions that are popping up throughout the country. But it's kind of strange that there isn't more of that infrastructure here in local governments to actually, because it's really local governments who are probably going to take the lead.
Yes.
Whether it's electric charging stations and other things, it's local governments who are going to do that stuff.
Sure.
But no one's really kind of jumped out in front to get that done. So it's just something I consider if we're going to keep a lot of these goals. These things are just goals and they'll stay as goals until you actually have an implementation plan.
Exactly. Right.
So I would recommend that it actually apply some resources.
Yeah.
Once this becomes a higher priority for our city, well, then what do? Well, let's get an environmental sustainability officer and let's start generating these programs for the city.
Okay.
Right? Just a thought.
Sure.
Would it be practical for timelines to be added on to any of these projects? I mean, I know that everything comes to money, but if you put a timeline on it too, then you
can. I think a lot of times comp plans like to shy away from timelines unless it's really a specific goal in mind to meet the vision of whether it be like a commercial versus residential mix or some kind of transportation improvement that they want to get done by a certain date to trigger other development. I honestly would shy away from specific dates. I mean, you can renew, and we're supposed to review the comp plan every 5 years, and that way I think would be a better way to handle it as opposed to actually putting definitive dates in there, because then if your comp plan can get even look more out of date if you have these timelines that have far surpassed and you haven't amended that through your public process. So I mean, we certainly consider that, but I think well, in my opinion, I think leaving dates off for these specific issues is probably appropriate.
What about just to put, not to have a completion date, but to have a review date, to go back and look at it like in 8 months, 10 months, which is an odd number, but.
And if we're talking about an implementation plan, would it be reasonable to have like a development of an implementation plan within the next 5 years or something like that, or 3 years?
I wouldn't even go out that far. I'd go sooner, just to review it, not necessary to implement, but to review to see where.
Here's the challenge, right? So you have your comprehensive plan, which is supposed to be a guiding document for the long term. Then we have our governing body priorities, which we have kind of a short-term roadmap,
Year by
right?
year, right.
And that's kind of, to be honest, that's staff's focus. Like we've laid out a comprehensive roadmap with 6 priorities. Each of those have milestones and actions every single year for the next 4 years.
Okay.
And that's what we're focused on kind of checking off. So before adding, that's why I hesitate adding timelines here, because they're not, to be honest with you, they're not going to be followed if they're in the comprehensive plan, unless the governing body just decides to, because we get our direction from the governing body. So if they're saying focus on these things, that's what we focus on. And so it's something you can recommend to the governing body. As a planning commission, you can always recommend these things. It's just that there would be that dichotomy of the comprehensive plan saying, well, prioritize this for the next few years, and then our strategic plan says, no, well, you got to prioritize this. As a staff, we're going to go with what the governing body
You mentioned an implementation plan, and that does sound like it has possibilities. It just depends on how it would factor into this and what you're saying.
Well, who would develop
the
that?
governing body? Well, that's just it. I mean, if the city thinks it's worthwhile, the city can say it will, but then, like you're saying, if the resources aren't there.
Well, and maybe those kind of timelines and strategy would be something that when we have dedicated staff, such as this environmental sustainability coordinator or whomever, could really focus on that and then actually do a more specific timeline. Comp plans are really supposed to be more long range.
It's a working document, yeah.
And then through staff and other initiatives that, you focus in on those issues and getting more specific with these
Yeah,
strategies.
so comprehensive plans are very valuable in guiding kind of land use, decision-making, zoning, things like that. To make them effective in guiding other areas of city policy, you kind of have to align them to governing body priorities and the capital improvement plan, right? The problem is that can change every few years, right? So and then it no longer becomes, proper for comprehensive plans because they're supposed to be more long-term. So think of these as kind of more values, right? What we aspire to do in the long run. So I don't think there's anything wrong with putting kind of the goal of it keeps things on the radar if you have it in your comprehensive plan because we're supposed to review it every few years and we can go back and say, hey, we haven't done anything with this.
Yeah.
And at least
Keep
that's
it, or
where
do we do
you
something
bring
with
this
it,
up
right?
to, we have the discussion as a community. Well, we haven't been, we've been ignoring X, Y, Z for now 15, 20 years. And when are we going to actually tackle that issue, right? And as we knock out other priorities, I think it opens up the opportunities to start focusing on other priorities as well. Right now, we're so focused on economic development. There's going to be a time where we're kind of done from a large scale priority effort. This is number one. We're going to achieve our objectives. And then we're going to say, well, now what, right? Code enforcement, that's a big priority right now. We're eventually going to get to the point where we've achieved success and are taking people to court and achieving compliance. Well, then what? The governing body is going to look for now new priorities. Like we'll start getting complaints about other things that were because we've been focused on these other items. So there's going to be changing priorities, and it's good to have in your comprehensive plan different long-term goals that can be references for now. What do we do? Right.
I don't know what my question is. You mentioned that the governing body has obviously they have to have something to guide them. If we as this group wanted to discuss something, we don't necessarily have access to what their priorities are, but if we wanted to start looking at something you all would tell us that's not doable right now because this is what their priorities are. Correct. So we wouldn't spin our wheels doing.
Yeah, it was just like economic development. There I had a lot of changes because we've done a lot over the last few years on that front in terms of planning the direction. So there's going to be chapters here where we don't have a lot of current kind of targets that we want to accomplish, but I still think it's a good idea to still talk about kind of long-term visions because again, the priority list, I think that Alana just passed out, that's different from what was passed 4 years ago when I first started. Drastically different. Things have changed.
Because things have happened.
Because we've been successful in some things and other things have gotten worse as we focus on other things. So who's to say in 2 years, 4 years, there's not going to be a shift, and the comprehensive plan could be a good guide for, well, what are other things we need to tackle that are important as a city?
Maybe this isn't as important as something we need to go back to.
Yeah. So
thank you.
It's always a tough balancing act for communities between strategic plans, executive board level strategic plans, and comprehensive plans. But comprehensive plans, the main purpose is to guide land use decisions for the community, to be our reference when we get development proposals, but also to do it's almost like a long-term vision and goals. Yeah, community goals for the long term, but that can become short-term action plans when the community, which represented by the governing body, says, hey, we got to get these things done now. That kind of signals more of the short term.
And it all comes back to budget.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, where do you juggle? How do you juggle your dollars? Yep.
And what's happening? So we weren't talking about public health just 2 years ago, right? As a priority.
Who would have thought?
So things happen, but now then you start getting hurricanes and other things, and who knows what we're going to be talking about.
Funny we don't have a chapter on pandemics here.
Health.
Who would have thought?
Health response or something like that. Yes.
So the world happens and it changes.
Yeah, it does.
Just like 9/11, we're about to celebrate 20 years, and that changed kind of the trajectory of a lot of focus as well. So you're impacted by things you're not focusing on that start, going down and what's happening in the environment around you. It shapes your short-term objectives, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have long-term vision and goals for the community as a reference. And I think that's where the comprehensive plan plays a great deal. So I think putting long-term ambitions are important in this document.
I mean, adding something in even the environmental section about public health might not be such a bad idea in broad-based terms.
Because we don't have a public health chapter.
No,
in the
we
compass.
don't.
Yeah, there was the recommendation in here to have a public health
It
chapter,
could go
if
in
I'm
the
not
next
mistaken,
chapter of
and
the human
never-
service.
But, yeah.
You
That's
could
actually not a
work
bad
it in
idea.
there.
That's a great idea.
Work it
That's
in
a great
there,
idea.
because that's our next chapter.
Yeah, because you kind of have that health and human services kind of really fit together.
And you already have something to base it on as to what you did this time and how you could enhance it or improve it if it happened again. So, of course, it's still happening, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my point in kind of my rant was, so past residents thought this was important, right? To put air quality, other components of the environment that we don't deal with as a city staff. And that was more an aspirational goal. So the question is, do we want to keep those aspirational goals or not?
Right.
And then do we want to add a little bit more teeth? Well, how do you actually get that done? Right? What is it we have to do to actually get that done? So in the future, staff developing an actual environmental sustainability implementation plan, right? Something like that. I think those are aspirational goals that are good references.
Since we're looking at what was done 16 years ago, doesn't mean we can't carry them through, but if we haven't had any substantial progress towards it, is there another way to get at it over the next number of years that may have a better chance than what we've had here?
I'm not sure in the short term there is.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we can't do. I think there's going to be a lot of good grant opportunities, and from a transportation standpoint, we may be able to knock out some things. From a facility standpoint, we may be able to knock out some things, but anything more comprehensive, I think, is going to be limited by our staff capability. I'm not an environmental expert, so I wouldn't feel comfortable developing something like that and kind of not providing you all expertise on what that actually looks like. Yeah. So I have to rely on staff. So if I'm going to make a zoning recommendation, I'm talking to Mickey. If I have to do something with stormwater, I'm talking to Alan, hearing from them, and then kind of doing my overall management analysis and then bringing that back to the governing body. So I'm always relying on experts among staff,
Experts there, sure.
policing, fire, et cetera. So here we don't really have that besides stormwater, right, and water quality. So we can rely on Alan to kind of guide us for that. But for other environmental issues, we just don't have that capability. So to Mickey's point, it's regional at this point. There's not a lot of local emphasis. But how effective are those regional entities really in actually who has the money?
Yes.
Has the power, right? That's just the reality. So we're the ones, the local governments are the ones who are actually doing things.
Yeah.
We don't do things on a regional, like some things like transportation, but there has to be an entity with money.
Right.
Like the VRE, right?
Yep.
They can do something because they have money to actually implement things. So maybe those regional efforts are just more informational, but I'm not sure how much they actually transform what we're doing at a local basis.
And the size of the COG would help, like with the Washington COG, that's a huge
Yeah.
organization. We don't have
Do
that.
we want the Washington COG doing that, or do we just want every jurisdiction kind of
Right.
stepping up and kind of managing its own program?
Yes, yeah.
Right?
So, just on your point, even through air quality, there is a transportation component because they do have that congestion and mitigation air quality grants that you can apply for trails and certain types of transportation projects.
And
Overall, for the region, that's where you get your money. I think it's a component of the 6-year plan.
And large-scale transportation plans usually have full-on environmental assessments with that as a decision component
Yes.
as well.
A way to support it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not sure any of our localized
Have that
projects
going
have
on.
it,
Yeah.
But you saw that with like the discussion on highway, the 270,
Sure.
right? So major highways are going to have those discussions.
Yes.
How are they improving or making worse kind of carbon emissions and other things. You get into those discussions, whereas in smaller road projects, you don't.
Yeah.
Okay, and then just moving on, the last ones didn't seem to, these 3 and 4, these are good goals to have. It's really focusing on environmental quality, air quality impacts for utilities and private industry. We don't really have public utilities that are really doing much, any type of pollution, I guess with the exception of the utility transfers station that's at the Novex what do they call those things? The Novec substation, thank you, I couldn't think of it. It's right at the entrance of our city off 28 behind some trees. So there's a little bit of environmental air quality issues there based on the chemicals used there. But that was really is for public utilities. And then we do have some industrial companies in the Honor Center that may warrant some type of looking at air quality impacts. But, you know, I think it's good to have in here. I don't know how, you know, what kind of practicality or where we would really focus in on that. But again, I don't think it's worth stricken from the
Record?
And then, okay, then this is stationary mobile point source pollution, and then focusing, of course, on medically sensitive populations. That's certainly a good goal to have. So as you can see from this, E1.3.6 talks about PCBs and incinerators. Al and I have felt that you know, where we got the idea that maybe this language was taken from somewhere else. We don't have any incinerators in the city. Didn't seem like something we should keep including. Certainly, point source pollution is something that is worth reducing, so that goal, of course, would strategy would stay in the plan. This is kind of redundant about monitoring air quality. We did talk about that. It's probably best handled by either VDOT or some regional organization. The E1.3 new 6, certainly this is going again for air quality with vegetative buffers along the arterial roadways. You know, we really only have a small stretch of 28 that's under city control. And again, I think, you know, to have a cohesive program and having any kind of buffer that would be substantial certainly would be better on a regional or organization that is just focuses on the regional or state level. So that certainly is one to keep as well. And then, so I thought here for the encouraging alternate technologies was to certainly add the installation of electric charging stations. We do actually allow them to be put in under our parking ordinance. It's not a requirement, but we do allow it. I certainly think that, you know, as rezoning applications come in, that maybe we should try to see if that is something that we can get businesses or, you know, have them put some in their parking lots. It certainly would be a good goal, trying to move towards any kind of alternative fuels.
I know this says encourage installation, but there's going to probably be in the infrastructure bill right now, there's a lot of money set aside for these charging stations for public parking lots as well, public facilities, parks as well. So those may become options for us over the next few years with federal money. Of course, you have to apply for the grant and win the grant, but it's an option.
But still, there is an opportunity. Yep.
I have a question. On the electric charging stations, say a person buys a car that's a hybrid or totally electric, are charging stations going to be allowed at private residences? How would that, they would have to have a permit to do it, but they'd have to go through the power company too. That's something you're going to
They can
have
do it in their
to
garage, right?
Yes,
consider.
I'm almost positive, I think they you would have to pull an electrical permit, but I believe they have one, charging mechanisms, let's just call it that, where it is for.
So should that be included somewhere?
Well, this was more for, businesses development and the.
Public parking lots.
Yeah, public
Yeah.
parking lots.
So maybe here isn't the place, but that's something to,
Yeah, we can
tuck
certainly
away.
encourage that as well for.
because it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Private property.
You're talking about for any new developments, kind of requiring,
Oh, you mean the installation for their specific
Yeah,
units?
because if I I'm not, but if I were to get an electric car,
yeah.
I'm not going to want to have to go down to some parking lot somewhere and sit for 2 hours to recharge my car when I can go home and plug it in when I get home.
Well, we just have an extension cord. We plug it right into the outdoor
I thought-
outlets.
So
don't
it's
need
not
anything
anything
special.
special that you have to get?
Nope, you just plug it right into the outlet. We have two to charge all the time.
That's what I thought.
It's just regular,
It comes with this little thing that plugs into your car, and it kind of has a wire that goes down to the driveway. Then it's this little box, and you just put the extension cord into the house, then into the box, and it.
so it's just regular power, it's not anything
Right.
extra or, okay. Interesting.
That's good. And then, actually, Alan and I were kind of stumped by this last one. Encourage utility companies to share easements. Don't know how that.
Do we have that
really
many
affects your quality.
Utility companies and, yeah.
So, I thought that one should go. So that's why that's.
Share anything, you're going to come take your property to put in what they want to put in.
That was a typo.
That's called sharing.
I'm not really
Basic
sure.
fishes.
Here, I'm going to come do this, you're going to share your property with me.
Yeah, you're right.
That's when what they call them, tree huggers. When the utility company comes and says, I'm going to take your tree down, and somebody ties himself to the tree.
You gotta take me with you.
I'll share your easement.
Yeah. I'm gonna stand on it.
Okay, so then the next objective has to do with soils and natural vegetation. We kind of focused on this from the first objective about land use, and in a way, this is redundant. I was I looked at all this language, and they divided up between wooded and non-wooded, and 25% and 15%. I didn't really see the need for that, and actually, I think I did see this language
In another.
in somebody else's plan. I'm for minimization, and so I just kind of cut to the chase about slopes of 15% and greater. And then
The 100.
100-year flood.
Yeah.
So, and just that we are mentioning the 100-year floodplain, we are in the process of updating our floodplain regulations and our floodplain maps. That anybody who has floodplain on their property was noticed that the maps were changing. I think there's gonna be, a formal adoption date, by, whether it's FEMA, the federal government, probably in early 2022, 6 months from now. And so we as a locality have to enact that as well.
Okay.
So we will be coming back to you with new floodplain maps. They really haven't changed actually too much. And for the most part, some of the floodplain areas, the 100 has actually minimized, and so been reduced in certain areas within the city. So it's a benefit for some homeowners. But we'll be taking that back to you along with updated regulations. So you can, we will be doing that within the next 6 to 8 months. So, but that is certainly what we need to do. Some of our current regulations need to be updated.
Yeah.
So. And so again, this is kind of repetitive, but going back to the 100-year floodplain and looking at that at the rezoning and conditional use permit applications, and as an environmental analysis. I mean, we can almost get rid of this one, so it's kind of redundant, but we'll just, keep it in there for reiteration. The next action strategy highlights vegetation for preserving soils, and of course helps with water quality. So I just kind of updated this. I didn't know what they really meant by disturbed areas. That could mean multiple things. So I thought to put in saying that construction, when they're doing the physical construction, because certainly you can have soil erosion then and have proper E&S controls, but also I think to look at that when you're preparing the landscaping plan for any kind of site development, you want to be at least cognizant of using native vegetation in areas because it's most helpful and certainly can thrive better than foreign species have done. I know several studies on that, and that's why they encourage those type of plants and trees. So. And our landscaping ordinance is very broad. And so, I mean, we don't really even have, a suggestion, but even putting just in this that, it should be some type of
Consideration.
right, native plants would be helpful. And, because some jurisdictions actually, they have a 25% canopy requirement, and we don't really even get into that.
Yeah.
So this was just kind of a addition I thought could be helpful and easy to make as part of just a quick zoning ordinance amendment for that. So I just, for the next strategy about soil contamination, I just tried to clean up the language a bit. Just trying to say that you should do an analysis if suspected contamination is there. There is such a thing as a phase 1 environmental assessment, and they also have a phase 2 that is done if they're, just to kind of get
Water
it's really
quality.
a sampling of if there is any kind of environmental concerns on the property. We could certainly put that in as one of the specifications or requirement for a rezoning or conditional use permit. I didn't know if we wanted to go that far, but so I thought that just kind of focusing on for areas that we do know have soil contamination, we just insist on that kind of analysis.
Michelle, what is a brownfield? What does that
It
terminology mean?
basically is a contaminated site with pollutions that is abandoned.
But it's not as it's not quite as contaminated as a Superfund site or anything like that. It's sort of it's had some contamination, but it can
Right.
be somewhat remediated without a great deal of cost or effort.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't
but
just.
So it could be revived?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
usually
Yes.
you have to install some kind of device.
Yep. Monitoring wells or something,
to
and then
clean it up. Mhm.
plantings or
Yes.
filtering the water or
Yes,
whatever it is. Yeah.
It could be an abandoned gas station
Mhm.
where all the gas, the
Oil.
underground tanks have
Has-
leaks
yep.
considerably.
Right.
And there really is oil in the soil, gas and oil in the soil, and they have to put in, kind of filtering mechanisms to get it out. This is a good example.
But it can be repurposed if it's like industrial or commercial use. You don't necessarily want
Yeah.
people living, like,
Right.
you don't want a residential built on there, but you could do light industrial or other type of commercial use with the
And I think they
brownfield.
do some kind of analysis in how,
Yep.
yeah.
Correct.
Or,
Yep.
you know, repurposing that site.
Because there's always, you can cap something, and as long as you're not living there and you know, you got public water or whatever it is, you don't have to
Right, that's-
worry about well usage or anything like that. Yep.
Fairfax had an event, John will remember, I don't know how many years ago, the tank farm leaked all down through a neighborhood. And it's
Think about
still, they still have problems to this day.
Wow.
So that,
Yeah, I heard.
that's a big brownfield. I mean, basements, and I'm surprised people were allowed to live there, because it was bad, it was bad.
Okay, and then last few strategies, I'm not really sure if we have any toxic waste sites here. But, I mean, this goes without saying, it's a nice goal, it's just something we should have in here. Didn't warrant really any change, and then, of course, we had to change the last action strategy, that certainly was a typo.
Yeah, I read that and I go,
Like a joke. That's like
what,
somebody,
that was a big
let's put this in
change.
there and see if it
Let's
gets through.
maximize or minimize, which do we want to
Let's
do?
tear it all out. It's rip all the vegetation out of there. That's funny.
Okay, so then we're moving on to surface water, watersheds. You know, talking about making sure our water quality and drinking water is preserved. We really did keep most of these. And again, really the one that we took out, the action strategy E1.5.2. This again is a reference to the Chesapeake Bay regulations. When they say intensely developed areas, that actually is defined in the Chesapeake Bay regs. It's usually a already developed area, and because even meaning it has some, not necessarily high density, but a more urban area, and they have their regulations in those to encourage redevelopment are not as stringent as one that would be in the RPA, but they try to
Promote it.
you know, have some type of goals or measurements in this area, but don't make it you know, so onerous where redevelopment wouldn't be possible. So again, since we don't do Chesapeake Bay, we just took that
No
out.
reason to have it. Yeah.
It goes without saying about hazardous substances away from water bodies. And then, so if this goes into, so the next one has to do with groundwater quality and removing any kind of hazardous substances, you know, away from surface waters and groundwater. Some of this is actually handled through the floodplain ordinance. You know, that if you're in the 100-year floodplain, and specifically in the floodway, which is really we'll just call it the center way
Channel,
of the
or the-
flood area,
whatever
the
the-
channel,
yep.
right? They do not allow any kind of storage of hazardous materials or any of that, and that is prohibited, or you have to, you know, put it above flood height is how the language reads. If you're not familiar with what a stormwater pollution prevention plan is, that's kind of a manual for water quality control that you can do on a regular basis. For example, the community center has a stormwater pollution prevention plan. It's just kind of going in and inspecting areas of your site where, you know, contamination could possibly happen, look for spill, look for stuff that's in disrepair, and actually have a log And just for example, we do have that conditional use permit in for pet suites with their outdoor doggy play yard. We are asking them to prepare a SWIP as part of the application for the dog waste and how they're going to prevent any of that going in. There's actually a stream back there, so that is important, and we're asking them to prepare a plan for that as part of the application.
Good.
That we'll be bringing to you at some point in time in the future. So we did think that would be a good element to add about certainly improving and having vital and valuable measures for promoting stormwater quality. We even mentioned, and this was even in there about the pollutants from firefighting to try to make sure we have procedures for continuing for that. And of course, we do have, anytime there's a leak or somebody knows of a spill or leak, the city has to go out and make sure that it's getting properly dealt with and contained. So we do have that. And even on our website, you can report a leak or spill, because we are required to go out and make sure everything is under control and contained to the extent under the law. So.
There's the adopt a stream.
Right, here's the adopt a stream.
That's right.
The manager was talking about furthermore community engagement there for water quality. And here's one for the natural buffer. We did take this out again. It's a reference to Chesapeake Bay. So, and a perennial stream. So this is anywhere where Chesapeake Bay resource protection area wouldn't apply on streams. So I had to learn all this when I did this for Herndon. But so a perennial stream is one that at least has some type of continuous flow. It doesn't necessarily have to be visible, and I think the actual requirements, they look for specific organisms that are in that stream, and there's other monitoring requirements that they look for to see if it's continually flowing. So perennial versus intermittent is kind of the way that I learned to remember it. So this would just apply as a goal to have some type of buffer, although it's not a waterway that you would, kind of see as a valuable stream. It still is helpful to have any kind of water flow that you have to have a buffer for filtration, and that's what this is really focusing on. So I thought the language was good. We just kind of took it out and placed it with language that doesn't speak specifically to Chesapeake Bay, but gets to the heart of what the requirement is. Cluster development is always a good way to protect environmentally sensitive areas. We don't have any cluster provisions in our ordinance. I mean, certainly people can do it. And again, that a lot of times this is helpful, especially when you're doing, and your ordinance discusses dwelling units per acre. We don't really have that restriction. We just have minimum lot sizes. So, this certainly could be done whether we amend our zoning ordinance or not. It can be done through zoning or that environmental analysis about maybe clustering is a better option, but it still is worthwhile to keep in there as a goal. Okay. And here again is another edit because of the Chesapeake Bay. It's just talking about your water bodies within the application or development that you're submitting for rezoning, and then taking out, of course, any reference. And similar to any kind of environmental analysis that you do, this technically is a bit redundant, but with more focus on water quality, so. And this just gets at a broad base about watershed management. Certainly that's done on the regional level. And we do that through there are stormwater requirements that, where the state actually came in a few years ago in 2016 and did minimum stormwater requirements for the entire state, which we follow. I certainly, I know there are other jurisdictions that go above and beyond what we do. But, we didn't have them even before 2016, I think is when they were implemented. So we have upped our stormwater regulations quite a bit in the last few years. And then the final strategy here, this goes back to we really don't have any density requirements, and these really are not applicable. So it really isn't worth keeping those in our strategies. So the next objective has to deal with impervious surface. I think these are pretty much all valid. The extent, of course, is impervious means you can't go through. When you're dealing with water quality, you want stuff to filter through the soil, right? So, and this is what all these goals, strategies talk about, limiting the amount of impervious surface through the conditional use or rezoning process, as well as any kind of redevelopment. This too is more from those legislative applications where we don't have to, where you can use these environmental measures through that process instead of having it in your zoning ordinance as a requirement. And that's why I really kind of added that intent here on the last strategy about the rezoning and conditional use process. And then that it goes back to the low impact design, and added language about reducing your parking lot footprint, whether that's through a parking reduction, is all that parking needed, and then, or if it is, put it up instead of
Structure versus all.
spread out. So that's the minor change there. Any comments or questions on those? Okay, moving along, we have stormwater runoff, managing stormwater runoff. All of these are pretty applicable and broad-based, so we didn't think they needed that much changes. You will see this, the filtering of first flush of urban runoff. That is kind of the low impact development where you're getting that, and I think sometimes there's other policies where they talk about the first, 2 inches of rainfall, capturing that as a goal, and that's what this action strategy E1.7.1 does. I think that's a goal that we can look forward to, but in order to intently focus on something like this, we really have to have some type of environmental person to come up with kind of the actual programs and strategies of
The approach
what
to
would be
make it
required.
happen.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot of policy questions in that, and I remember this being actually quite a big discussion in my previous life in Fairfax when they were doing the Tysons. plan, the comp plan amendment there, and ensuring that the stormwater was done, especially with all the high-intensity development and the, if you will, skyscrapers and the FARs were gonna go, well, actually, they hadn't, it was mostly around 7 to 8 is what they were looking at, so. So there really wasn't that many changes here, just reiterating those stormwater quality. And if anything, we could get more specific about our MS4 permit. That would take Alan and I a bit of time to see, you know, if there were longer range strategies we can incorporate and reference back to our program. I mean, again, that is required, so I don't know how beneficial that would be, but, you know, at least in the text, we should acknowledge that we do have that program, and at least maybe have something there as an appendices that shows, you know, what we're doing, or just incorporate it by reference. And then this objective E18 had to do with groundwater and aquifers. This is really kind of on a regional basis, and really focusing on, you know, where our drinking water is coming from, and how we can use specific groups and you know, just protecting our watershed. So these are broad-based goals. We didn't, this action strategy about the secondary containment for storage tanks, that now is a requirement. So there really isn't a need to promote it because you can't
Have it anyway. Yeah.
Which is good here, you know, it's nice to see that, oh, that was a goal and now it's mandatory, so that's one way to protect the groundwater, of course.
Do we know if we have any underground storage tanks that possibly?
Leaking ones, or,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know at all. The only thing I do know is that they did put new ones at the 7-Eleven in Manassas and
Yes.
Euclid Avenue,
Yeah.
which I thought was good because I don't know how long
They've been in there, yeah.
But you know, we did see the plans of the what they were proposing to put under, which is now they finally completed that construction. Probably longer than I remember, but yeah, I honestly don't know, and I don't know if anybody's really done any kind of study or investigation into, I mean, typically it would be your gas stations, right? Or it could be some of any kind of business or company that was in the Connor Center that may have had a storage tank.
Because I don't know how often DEQ updates their list.
Yes, I don't know.
I'm not sure how often they do, so.
Would that include propane?
If
it's underground.
yes,
Propane is stored underground sometimes.
It can be,
Oil
yes.
and propane, yep.
Right,
If it's
yeah.
oil or, yep.
Yeah, because they have, you know, they have this, you know, this LUST program, leaking
Lust,
underground
and I wasn't going to say the lust, but very good. Yes, indeed. You got the US program and you got the leaky ones. That's right.
So,
Yep.
you know, they do keep track of,
Yeah.
of where those are.
I just don't know how often they update.
Yeah, and
it, so
I'm
I
not
don't
sure either.
Remember how they? Yep.
Yeah, you're supposed to.
So often.
Right. I mean, yeah. So I mean that we. But that was one of those components, and maybe we could add something in there about that, is trying to see if we, you know, monitor or identify any potential
Right.
underground storage tanks instead of saying promote the use. Just put that in.
Actually, contact DEQ and see what they've got, maybe, and see if it.
How would you
updated
even
it is.
find that?
Well, I think honestly, it's kind of, you have to kind of go through the history of the site.
Whoever
and
had
then
it,
really
yeah.
it would really be your local government to go in and identify, or at least suspect that there may be one there, and then report it to the state. But
'Cause-
yeah,
In some of these older homes, there could have been propane heating and they convert to something else and that tank could still be under that house, or not under the house, but out in the yard there, and we wouldn't know it.
I don't know how many homes in Manassas Park would actually have that. Typically, you need like really large yards for that, and I don't know, given most of the lots, at least, and even on the west side, are less than 10,000 square feet.
Yeah, yeah.
But maybe somebody has done it. I'm not sure. And again, that would be kind of really looking through the records to.
And you know, you're thinking back 20, 25 years. Well, who would still be around that would know that?
Well,
Yeah.
it is a challenge to find them. I know that they have to do at least some type of investigation. And it really is for somebody in the government.
Wonder if there's some kind of an aerial, look in the ground kind of a, you know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah, somebody.
That'd be
would really
interesting
have
to find out.
investigate
Wow.
that, yeah.
I would suspect that anything with the petroleum fuel tanks that the fire department would have some type of information.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's
As part of
right.
our
Okay.
response to
That's-
hazmat situations.
Yeah.
Well, they found out where one was in Maryland when it blew up the other day. Yeah.
That's a way, it's not the
one
best
way
way
to
to
do
find
it.
out, but,
I actually know they have areas marked, designated, certain.
You would think that there would be some kind of identifier in the ground, yeah.
Okay, and these are the ones that they were talking about for using line catchments for water quality inlets, for areas where you think leaks are gonna happen. Soil erosion maintenance enforcement, we do have ENS site inspectors who are certified in the Virginia ENS controls. And, there's always room for improvement. So we've been coordinating a lot with DEQ on some of these, so it is very important. And, honestly, we probably need more staff to do probably
more thorough.
more thorough inspections on that. So that's what the line improvement strength was put in there for. And then again, reference to the last strategy about vegetation for promoting good stormwater quality. There's only one strategy for objective E19. There really wasn't much to change there. It said force mains. I wasn't really sure why that was that specific, so I just tried to reduce it down to any type of
More
sewer
generally to
line.
lines, yep.
Right. Any other kind of petroleum or whatever.
Anything
Other
transferring
hazardous
something there, is right?
substance lines we would have besides, something like colonial oil, which is really more of a petroleum pipeline, but I don't know if we had any hazardous substance lines. So we might want to strike that, but since it was in there, I just kind of left it. But we should probably investigate whether we have any underground lines that go, pipelines that go somewhere else. Okay, moving along, public drinking water. So I kind of looked into this. The Occoquan watershed program, The last thing I saw on it was in 2003. I couldn't, and I think I even looked to see for board members in some of the jurisdictions, and it didn't look like they had been filled for a while. Honestly, I didn't spend too much time on it, but I did look at it to say, I don't even know if this program's really, being operated currently. So that's why I took out the specific program name and try to do more broad-based policies when it came to water quality. Again, this is usually a regional issue. I mean, this program was, when I was reading it, was kind of developed, I guess, for Occoquan in the 80s for water quality for the Occoquan Reservoir, for the drinking water. It was funny because they did mention that Fairfax County had this huge downzoning for the Occoquan watershed, and actually people in a lot of industries sued Fairfax County for that, and that was one of the policies that the Virginia courts upheld because of protecting water quality. So there is limits in, they do have this Occoquan watershed overlay in parts of, because it would be the western county. So again, there are initiatives. I don't know to what extent, so I just wanted to put in some broad-based language there.
Fine.
Michelle, if I may, there's something missing in the verbiage.
Is there?
Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. Continue to support policies and initiatives that improve the water quality of the Occoquan. Of the Occoquan watershed,
Yeah.
there's something missing right there.
Okay.
It'd be
That's
of,
it,
yeah.
It just, I was reading, I said, what am I missing there?
Something not quite bridging the gap there.
Yeah, it wasn't flowing.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you.
I think, it's just of, I think is all it needs.
Thank you for that. Probably about, Prince William County and supporting these are the people we get their drinking water from, that certainly didn't need to be amended. And finally, I just kind of want to, wrap up some of these real quickly.
Before you go on, can I have one question?
Sure.
It pertains to the drinking water. Back in the overview at the beginning of the chapter, it refers that the city, I had it, now I'm missing it. Where we get our drinking water from. It was from city wells and, okay, city water resources are under increased demand as the area becomes more urbanized. We obtain our water from city wells in the city of Manassas. That needs to be changed way back there because the wells are all gone, right?
That's what I figured,
Yeah.
yeah.
But you don't refer to it here, so it didn't match up.
Right.
But somewhere that needs to be taken out.
We do need to, I didn't.
'Cause all those
just
wells have been shut
yes,
down, right?
There are several things that need to be changed in the actual.
Further back,
text.
yeah.
Narrative,
yeah.
That's certainly one of them. I didn't really want to focus on that, and it, rewriting that text for the.
All the
chapter
overview, yeah.
would take a little bit more time, so, but yes, no, I did notice that myself.
Yeah.
I thank you for bringing that up, because I noticed that was not true. So, great. Thank you.
And internal combustion engines, huh, on the Occoquan Reservoir.
I'd be interested to know what the history of that is. I could not find anything, for the watershed or the
The reservoir.
and the reservoir specifically, that they, that was a goal. I kind of looked through Prince William's environmental program and even comp plan. I did a quick search. What I did find is they limit the horsepower on the reservoir to no more than 10 engines to 10 horsepower. So I just struck that. I didn't see why or specifically that was necessary. But if you want us to, look into that, we can. But again, I kind of went back to this first one where it was just a broad-based approach to, water quality program elements that we should be supporting.
Doesn't seem like a need for this, so that's good.
So the vegetation and mature trees, any of this, I believe I thought was good as forward-thinking goals. We could have actually, identified. Some of my thoughts were, well, we could. If there is a Tree City program, I don't know if you're familiar with that. A lot of cities have our Tree City, and they get a flag and a plaque, and you have to do stuff every year. And I believe you actually have to have a forester on staff, and an appropriate landscape ordinance, right?
Yep.
I thought this was broad enough. I know there's probably a lot more we could do with regard to landscaping and tree preservation in the city. I know that even, you can even designate a tree, specific trees in the city as a monument tree or some type of recognition that this is a significant tree in your community. There's several things that you could do to add to this. I thought this was just sufficient as it's written, but I know it could probably be strengthened in many regards, but I thought that was good, at least for this review. And then lastly, this had to do with wildlife and flora and fauna. I really tried to, if you look at the language, it said identification and monitoring of the city resident animal and plant species. I didn't really think, well, we don't have anybody on staff who would do that.
Right.
Again, I thought a focused approach to our natural areas and just identifying Signal Hill and Blooms Park as a place to start for that, and really do a natural resource management plan for those specific areas, thinking that would probably be the best approach to look at our resources there. We could certainly add maybe Camp Carondelet, which is a small wooded area in Blooms Crossing. I don't know, and honestly, I don't know how many acres it's there, but I know it's wooded, and maybe we could add that in there too, and some other of the other minor open areas we have in the city. But that was kind of my initial thought. And then the other ones, of course, are for the second one has to do with endangered and threatened populations. I thought it was best to determine if we had any first.
To start with,
and
that's a good idea. Yes.
Implement them as we warranted if we needed them. I mean, it's honestly probably if we had any, it would more be flora, some kind of plants. You'd be surprised what kind of, if there are wetlands in the community, there may be some species of plants that thrive in this area given the soils underneath. I don't know. I mean, we don't have an environmentalist on staff or a naturalist who could identify that, but it's certainly worth having it in the plan and identifying those populations. And then, of course, wetland restoration. I don't know how practical this is, that we would actually kind of develop this wetland bank, if you will, but I didn't see really the need to amend it any further.
And then you get into credits and the quality of the land and the bank and the
through our stormwater management program, if you can't meet the requirements, they have banks within the state that you can go to, and as that you purchase nutrient credits, and as part of the our site development permit process, they have to give us a copy of that they purchased them,
proof that
where it all came from.
Right.
So, that's really how this is done. It's not really for wetlands, and there are some areas of the city that do have wetlands, I don't know if we have enough where we could, sit there and say, okay, you can do this and put it there. But it's certainly something to consider. I mean, again, I think we would have to kind of inventory all that and figure that
See what we
out.
have first, and, yeah.
That was one thing I had put a question mark. Where are the wetlands within the city limits?
Well, yes, I've seen them on a few site plans. I think actually there's some in Dominion Crossing and I think in Bloom's Crossing as well. Those little areas that you see,
Yeah.
like, why is that there? Because it's just really like, a tree-lined, linear, open space area. Typically, it's because there's wetlands.
Well, the one there in Dominion, where all the cattails grow, that looked like to me a developer runoff kind of a thing.
Like a
Well,
detention
it's
or retention.
incorporated.
But so it was there to start with and they just enlarged it, okay.
Yeah.
Because definitely when you see cattails growing, that's not a normal,
That's wetland. That's-
yeah, that's a wetland, yeah.
Hydrophytic vegetation.
I've not been there originally, but with the clearing and the concentration of the development and the clearing of the land, they may have just, gotten in there, but that actually is.
But that's not something you plant, that's a natural,
Right, yeah,
it
that's
just
right,
comes out
exactly.
and,
Yeah.
so that's like, wow, look at that.
Good one.
Yeah.
That's right.
So were there any other questions, comments?
Good job.
Yes, thank you very much. That was very thorough. And then Human Services next, it looks like there. Is that what you saw there? Good. Cool.
Do we have a date for
Right.
September?
Their next meeting, I think, is October 13th.
Oh, we're in September,
Yeah, so it
duh.
is
That's okay.
Yeah,
That's all
you
right.
believe it, I
Don't
know.
repeat September. We don't need to. Right?
Upstairs.
Yeah, so thank you for reminding. So, we will be in the school board conference.
Oh, that's right, 'cause we're voting.
There's voting.
Oh,
Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm part of that.
early voting.
project.
So they cordon off this area for that, starting on the 16th of September, so.
The address to the school board will be sent out, or we'll.
Just upstairs.
Oh, okay, good. Oh, good. Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
So what'll the date be? Did anybody determine?
It'll be.
13
and I know
October.
Keith is coordinating that, so if there's any date change.
Yeah, so it should be October 13th.
13? Okay.
And we may have a site plan, that will be coming before us.
Okay.
Cause I think they're almost ready now. I just got some, last review comments in, and I think, once, they should be ready for next month, so. That'll be, and we need to have a meeting next month, so that, and with this human services, so we'll have a few items on the agenda.
Good. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. That was good. Great. We have no report of special committees, and not to have you talk more there, Administrator Berry, but if there's anything you'd like to inform us here, please feel free to do so.
Well, I think I mentioned most of it. I just wanted to kind of update you on some of the plans that are coming through. I did touch on all of them with the exception of the VRE garage. I believe they're at 60% design.
Okay.
And they have not formally submitted a site plan, but that, and maybe Laszlo, do you know more of the time frame of when we want that to start construction? So they'll have to have that site plan. I anticipate it'll be coming.
Yeah, their goal.
In the next few months.
Their goal is to be complete with design by January and then start issuing bids in the spring and hopefully break ground by May or June
Okay.
of 2022.
So,
If everything works out fine.
Works
There's
out.
still
Okay, all right.
and
Nice.
likely 18-month
Okay.
construction time frame. So by the Christmas time, 2023 is when they're planning to be open, and we're hopeful the theater will open the same.
Good.
The theater would actually be ready sooner, but we're trying to kind of slow them in so that they're open
it.
at the same time.
Nicely done. Good. Okay.
Yep.
great. Well, so then the site plan needs to come.
Yes.
For this, so, maybe, by this end of the year, we'll see. They'll probably submit it, within the next, Well, it's almost, you think it's,
We're almost.
we're almost
Yeah,
October, so
we
the
are.
new year's only, 2 months
Couple
away
months,
now,
that's
so,
right, yeah.
Yeah, we can
September
expect
just
that.
started.
That's right, that's what
When he was
Just
asleep, 'cause
started.
he's out.
September
Yeah,
8th.
yeah, he's told me, so, yeah, I'm gonna, keep on top of that. So, yes, the site plan that I anticipate coming in October is we have it's really a contractor's yard, it's really just across the way here, it's just gonna be, a open area where, contractor storage can occur, so it's not that intensive a use, no building.
Okay.
So, that the owner is anxious to, get that started before winter time. And I believe he's meeting most of the minimum requirements now. I did mention the floodplain ordinance, that is something that we'll be undertaking, and then the outdoor doggy area, at Pet Suites. And just one final note, in case you're not aware, I'm sure Lana is that we are having a September 11th commemoration on Saturday here at City Hall outdoors at 9:30. So I thought I'd just mention that to the Planning Commission and anybody who's listening in, that we're doing that little celebration. And that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. The time is 8:50. All right.
Okay.
Very good.